Would you always recommend first to move out the company first, or would you recommend to move out your personal residency first?
Personal residency I would always recommend first. Nothing rains on your parade worse than receiving a message from the tax authority saying that upon closer inspection, it turns out that you actually owe 25,000 euros. We have had clients come to us with that. If you're a nomad, there's 4 things you need to know. Thing 1 is citizenship. This affects where you can own property, where you can go visa-free, where you can get bank accounts. Thing 2 is residency, and specifically tax residency. Thing 3, incorporation. So where is your company set up? Which corporate registry is it located in? And then there's thing 4, which is somebody starts talking to me and they're extremely interested in the tax policy. They're telling me, okay, so I can pay 0 tax by going to so-and-so jurisdiction, etc. And I ask them, okay, yeah, how much are you saving by doing this? And they're like, oh, I make 12,000 euros a year. And I'm like, you're below minimum wage, essentially.
I know I will go to you when the time is right.
I'll be glad to have you.
Ciao. All right, let's go. We're here with Aleksa. And if no one knew who you are, which is probably the case here, how would you introduce yourself, and why should people listen to you with the topic that we're going to talk about?
My name is Aleksa. I come from Serbia. I've been nomading for 8 years, and for 7 out of those 8 years, I've been helping people not pay taxes. So I've been going around the world, figuring out what the best structures are, how banking works, how tax residencies work, and most importantly, what is the actual technology that makes this stuff happen. So anybody can just go on ChatGPT and ask, what is the best tax residency for me from so-and-so country? But where it really clicks is when you look at something like SAFE-T, that's SAF-T, which is a tax interchange platform used between, like Canada and France. So it's like understanding the actual technology that these places use.
And it's not only when it comes to tax optimization, but it's also when it comes to flag theory. So planting multiple flags, having multiple passports to go free around the world.
Exactly.
So that's like what we're going to dive into. Like, when is it good to get the hell out of your own country? What is the best way to set up your company structure, to set up your personal structure, to pay as less taxes as possible, of course, and what are the best ways? And also, where should you plant your flags? How should you do that? Why? Etc. And technologies behind it.
Different strokes for different folks. I mean, you've got people who are traveling salesmen, you've got people who run businesses that are completely online or that sell physical products, and there's different setups for all of them.
Why?
So here's the thing. When you're physically somewhere, there's a way that the government registers that. They look at their database and they see that your passport has come into the country. And if you move physical products, you need addresses to be put on invoices, you need to be able to rent vehicles, you need insurance on that stuff. So let's say that you're moving physical products out of the Emirates. Yes, some people just open up a free zone company and pay companies to do those.
What's a free zone company?
So in the Emirates, for example, you've got these small localized areas, like fenced off industrial parks, essentially, where there's different regulations than in the rest of the Emirate of Dubai. So, example, if you just do a normal Dubai company, you get licensed to do a certain set of businesses, and you're not allowed to do anything outside of that. And inside of the free zone, you get licensed way quicker, and you can hold several licenses. And when you're inside of the free zone, there's a bunch of foreign ownership advantages that you're allowed to have. So you can own 100% of a company without any repercussions, whereas inside of the Dubai Emirate mainland, so to speak, you've got certain minimums about you have to rent office space, you need to hire locals, you need to get certain types of licenses, you need to get certain types of insurance, that type of thing. So getting released from all of those requirements in a free zone is a great differentiator between mainland incorporation and free zone incorporation.
And this would be interesting if you would move physical things.
Right.
So for example, with e-commerce.
Correct.
And when is it, like, what is interesting for different structures? So you have e-commerce, you have services.
You have an individual going around doing freelance consulting work. You've got a company that hires and employs, 100 people, and they do some type of SaaS. You've got setups where you're investing and managing a fund. So the thing that you're optimizing for is capital gains as opposed to direct income from sales. You've got retired people who literally just collect dividends and maybe have some semi-active investments, but 90% of the time they're just spending money and living a quiet life. You've got family setups where you want to make sure that certain property goes on to your children, to your successors. So, the retired people, they start thinking about that after a while. And then you need to have a trust or some type of company that can own assets for you so they don't get taxed on estate and death tax. I mean, you've got in the UK, it's upwards of 40% of
It's like
leaving
a
an estate.
rolling knowledge book. It's like you have this, you have this, you have this, you have this, you have this. So if you would go back a little bit
Mhm.
into your entire start before we dive a little bit into the setups, you started nomading. You did it for 7 years, you
Mhm.
said, and 6 years you've been in tax optimizations and everything right now.
Right. 8 years of nomading and 7 years of tax
Yeah.
stuff.
So how did you start? What?
So I started by going to university in Vienna and studying financial law. And one of the things that they gave us some pointers on there is tax policy and how to shoot through loopholes. And when I was in Vienna, I ran into an American company that I started working with, and they did essentially industrial site consulting around the world. So, Coca-Cola wanted to open up a factory in Burundi. We help them figure out how to do that, right? And simultaneously, you're helping companies find places where they can pay less tax and operate efficiently. And on the other end, you're helping the government to attract investment because, if you're a political guy and you say, oh, we attracted a Coca-Cola factory that employs 500 people, well, that's a massive win for you politically, right?
That's really interesting. So there's always two games at play.
Oh, always, always. And whenever we talk about any of this tax stuff, a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that there's just this monolithic mechanical system. There's always a human being on the other side. And sometimes it literally pays to understand what type of human being is on the other side because a lot of this tax policy stuff is quite discretionary. So I went around the world looking at these industrial parks and free zones, special economic zones specifically. And for the longest time, when I tried to get paid, it was either crypto or I wouldn't get paid at all. And I wouldn't get paid at all because I would provide my bank account information in Serbia, and people would just be like, yeah, I can't really send money to that account. Like, it gets refused. My bank doesn't want to do it. And then when it does come in, my bank asks for various proofs of where does this money come from, et cetera, et cetera. And it was just a massive headache. And then I realized, well, hold on, what other ways are there of getting paid? So I had this pain point of I can't get paid, which, that's a big one. So I go around and I see that I can open up a company somewhere overseas and just invoice people from my company as opposed to myself as a physical person. So I went over to the Caribbean and I discovered that there's a special economic zone inside of a British overseas territory in the Caribbean. And I opened up a company with this special economic zone for privacy reasons. I'm not going to say now which one it is, but I went to a different Caribbean country and opened up a bank account for that company. So I've already planted two flags by doing that, and in so doing, I've got one jurisdiction which is very friendly for banking and just allowing transactions to move through. And then on the other one, I've got a jurisdiction where just filing taxes and filing your annual returns, getting licensed, that type of thing is expedited and extremely simple. So when I opened that company, suddenly it became way easier for me to invoice clients, receive payments, get business going, all of that stuff. And when I did that, I realized, well, hold on, there must be a lot of people in a similar position as me who've got the same problem. And all of the knowledge that I used to apply to corporates and helping them not pay taxes in these industrial parks, I started moving that to individuals. So I help a couple of friends move their companies overseas, open up something like a US limited company, for example, which is a fantastic way if you're not a resident in the US, if you're a a non-resident alien in the US, then all your transactions through that company are disregarded by the US for the purposes of taxation, and that's an absolutely massive change in the way that you can do business, because nobody's stopping you from making transactions, nobody's stopping you from getting licensed, none of that.
And that's a LLC or is it
That's an LLC, yeah,
Yeah.
limited liability company. And a lot of time people will take Wyoming, they'll take Delaware, and specifically why they take those states is because those are states with extremely low state taxes. Because when you've got an LLC as a non-resident alien, then you're completely free from federal tax,
And
but
does
state
it
tax still applies.
does it matter if you have an LLC, for example, where your residency is? Like, so for example, we have the case here that you happen to know a friend
Mhm.
who has a residency still in Netherlands, and what a coincidence, by the way. It's like, yeah,
Incredible.
total coincidence. And he wants to move his company outside of the Netherlands. Would you always recommend first to move out the company first, or would you recommend to move out your personal residency first?
Personal residency, I would always recommend first.
Why?
Because when you want to live your life, spend money, etc., usually the way people do that is from their private accounts. A lot of people, of course, they spend money from their business accounts by saying that hotel stays and flights are all business expenses, and that's fine. But we want to make sure that we can also go to restaurants and enjoy ourselves, and go to entertainment venues and that type of thing. And in order to do that, you want a personal residency setup which does not land you in hot taxation water, because nothing rains on your parade worse than receiving a message from the tax authority saying that upon closer inspection, it turns out that you actually owe 25,000 euros for the previous fiscal year, which we have had clients come to us with that. And
I actually had a friend, which name I'm not gonna call out, but I literally have a friend who told me about this, that he was a fiscal residency of a certain country, and he did online coaching
Mhm.
from another country, and then it was like, hey, but you did your coaching from here, so you need to pay us taxes. And then the other country was like, yeah, but you're a resident here, so you need to pay us taxes. And then you have like this gray zone area that you're still a resident of your original country, but you worked from there for quite a sum of time.
Mhm.
You need to have a desk to work from, right?
Mhm.
And then they use that as their argument to basically fuck you over.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, it sounds like your friend got stuck in a double taxation trap, pretty much, where they didn't deregister from their country of origin, and they went to a different country and stayed there for a while. And what happens then is the previous country that you left never gets the memo that you left, because the tax authority doesn't check the passport police databases to see if you've left the country. They don't care enough to do that.
And it was all still in Schengen, so I also think that,
That as well,
yeah,
because
like
Schengen doesn't track that kind of movement. What you have to do is you have to apply for residency somewhere else, and also dismiss your residency in your previous place. And a lot of people think that it's enough to just get a residency permit. We're recording this in Thailand, for example. Oh yeah, I'm just going to leave Germany and I'm going to go to Thailand, get my residency permit in Thailand, and I read somewhere or I saw somewhere on Instagram something about 180 days, and oh yeah, I'm not in Germany. I haven't been in Germany for 180 days, so I owe no taxes. That is a very amateurish way of thinking that lands a lot of people in hot water, and uh, it's something that I've seen more times than I care to say, and it's quite an easy thing to get around. All you have to do is just go to your local tax authority in the country that you're from, tell them I'm leaving on so and so date. They write that down in their paperwork, and you only get taxed for that fiscal period up until the date that you leave. And even there, there's plenty of room for maneuvering and variability. So that's a very common error that I find people make.
And what's the best way to avoid that? So then we talk about fiscal residency, for example. Then you have 1,000 options.
Absolutely. Well, you to be exact, you have about 204 or however many territories in UN.
And then you also have like e-residency that they have in like what's this?
Estonia.
Estonia. You have the e-residency, and then you have I heard you a lot say about Paraguay.
Paraguay, yeah.
Paraguay, it's good for residency. Then you hear a lot of people talk about Dubai. Then you hear a lot
Exactly.
of like, okay, so step one is get out of your country with your residency.
It's like think about it as a bad romantic relationship, right? Right? You definitely want to get out of the previous one before engaging in the next. And why do you want to do that? Well, because exactly like in a romantic situation, maybe the previous relationship starts calling you on your phone in the middle of a party where you're meeting somebody, right? And the point is, you want to eliminate those interruptions and that chaos that comes from, like I mentioned, the unpaid 25,000 euro tax bill. So definitely break up with your first tax residency or fiscal residency. Those are the same term. Break up with that one first before getting your second. You're allowed to be a tax resident of nowhere specifically. Um, I wouldn't recommend staying that way for a long time. Because when you want to settle down and when you want to buy a house somewhere, a lot of places will ask you for providence of funds, which places were you tax resident in for the last 5 years, that type of thing. And if you suddenly have this big hole in your tax resume, so to speak, then you can get problems with not being able to get credit for a house. You might not be allowed to open up a permanent residency or get citizenship in a country that you choose. There are some issues that can come about from not having a tax residency at all. So the preference is to get a tax residency which disregards your international earnings or taxes you at 0%, which are two different things, actually.
So there's three distinctions I want to make here, and that I want to dive into. One is the difference between tax residency and citizenship, because I think a lot of people like.
There's four things.
Okay,
If you're a nomad, there's four things you need to know. Thing one is citizenship. This is the passport that you carry. This affects where you can own property, where you can go visa-free, where you can get bank accounts. For all of these things, you need to provide your passport. And if you provide it from, no offense to this country, but if you provide it from Burkina Faso, a lot of people, a lot of banks and institutions will straight up refuse you because they don't want nothing to do with a country that's in the middle of a lot of chaos. So that's citizenship. Thing two is residency, and specifically tax residency. This means, where are you registered as a taxpayer? Where do you receive your mail, legally speaking? And what is your official domicile? So where is your permanent place of abode? And obviously, there's gray areas here. You can be a legal resident of a place like Paraguay and be a tax resident of a place like Paraguay without being there very much at all. Paraguay only requires you to be there 1 day every 3 years. So that would be your legal residency. And of course, within that, you've got things like getting a residency permit to stay in a country. You've got extended visas. All of that stuff is tied up in thing two. So that was thing two. Thing three is incorporation. So where is your company set up? Which corporate registry is it located in? So, for example, if you've got a company in the United Kingdom, and some Europeans are now able to use the United Kingdom since it's outside of the EU. You get it as a UK limited company or a UK limited partnership, and that is registered in Company House. That is the British corporate registry. It's a database of companies, and that dictates which country that company is taxed in. So let's say that you've got a UK company and it's completely disregarded for tax purposes. Here's an interesting thing. If a different country that you're resident in, let's say Andorra, right, the little place between France and Spain, if you're resident in Andorra and you live there 365 days out of the year, it's 100% your domicile. Andorra will look at your company in the UK And they'll be like, well, hold on, all of the decisions about this company, all of its mind and management takes place in Andorra. The fact that it's, incorporated in Britain makes no odds. So it's treated and taxed by the Andorrans as an Andorran company. So what they'll do, the Andorrans, they will send a taxation request to His Majesty's Revenue Collection in the UK, which is essentially the British IRS, and they will ask for the revenue numbers, the tax returns, the number of employees, all that information about your company, and then they'll issue a tax bill to one, the company's address in Britain, and two, to the ultimate beneficial owner, which is yourself, in Andorra. And you have to figure out ways of making sure that your corporation, even though it's somewhere offshore and somewhere outside of your country of residence, you need to make sure that those countries don't have very close ties with exchanging tax information and that type of thing. That's a loophole that you need to shoot through. So that's thing 3, corporate registry. And then there's thing 4, which is banking. And of the 4, I'd say banking is the simplest, because the only thing that happens there is you choose a bank that you like in terms of their customer service, in terms of UI, whatever they offer, cards, crypto conversion, whatever they offer. And the thing you look at is which international banking regulations do they submit to. So the most relevant one that almost every bank in the world submits to is FATCA, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act. This is something that the US makes pretty much every foreign bank sign. And it's a massive, like 20-page form that you need to fill out, telling the US that you are not a US citizen trying to offshore your earnings, you're not avoiding US taxes. So it's this massive thing. But there's also other international information exchange systems that banks may or may not be privy to. And like it's terrible, because the banking exchange systems are different from the tax residency exchange systems, are different from the systems for tracking where you are based on your passport. And thank goodness that these systems are so disintegrated and that these people don't communicate with each other. There is no global system that, like, they would have you believe that when you watch these Jason Bourne movies and James Bond, whatever, they'll have you think that this global system is just this iron fist, and it's and everything is organized and we know where everybody's moving and that type of thing. The truth is, it's a bunch of people in a bunch of different offices, and everybody's just looking at spreadsheets, and they are confused as you and I would be looking at that stuff. So they go to these conferences and they try to figure out certain joint languages and standards for exchanging information. But just when you've got 200 plus countries and territories exchanging information on 4 to 5 different levels of citizenship, movement, banking, corporate, it is just a basilisk for them to grab hold
even
of.
listening to you right now about the 4 points that you say, it's very easy. I'm like, this is a lot. So I'm always a big fan of simplifying things.
Mm-hmm.
So let's start with, thank you first of all for making that distinction between citizenship and residency.
Yes.
And tax-paying residency,
Yep.
to corporate residency, to
Banking.
where are you banking.
Yeah.
And I think that's the structure that we will follow now. But first, when is a good point to say, hey, get the F out of my country? And
that's a great question, because I go to these digital nomad events, for example, and somebody starts talking to me and they're extremely interested in the tax policy, and they get quite knowledgeable. I mean, people are speaking to AIs about this stuff and getting actually a lot of good information from that. And they're telling me, okay, so I can pay 0 tax by going to so-and-so jurisdiction, etc. And I ask them, okay, yeah, how much are you saving by doing this? And they're like, oh, I make 12,000 euros a year. And I'm like, man, like, you're disregarded in most countries for taxation purposes. Like, you're below minimum wage, essentially. The fact that you're living a good life in Thailand or Bali or whatever is great for you, but your country does not care about you. You're like not making enough to make these decisions. And I'd say that the amount of let's just say euros, because I assume it's mostly Europeans listening. The amount of euros that you need to be making a year before you start making this decision is like 40,000 to 45,000 euros a year. That's the point at which you want to be entertaining discussions of taxes, because below that, even if you are doing something wrong, like if you're not filing taxes regularly or something like that, the amounts that you owe will be minuscule. It'll be like 2 to 3,000 euros every couple of years. It's like really not that much, and it's easy to figure out even if you do something wrong. It's when you do well-paid jobs, 100K a year, that type of thing, and you don't do anything and you just go with the
Yeah.
flow, that's when problems happen.
Yeah. So, for example, if I just take myself here and I'm 100% honest about all my numbers and things, I have nothing to hide so far. So, for me as a case, it's not necessarily interesting yet to talk about residencies. Like, I'm full-time nomading. Like, I'm homeless with a laptop and Wi-Fi. That's me. But my company is registered in the Netherlands. I am a citizen of the Netherlands. And of course, like I have worldwide clients and stuff, and like I just have a bookkeeper who manages this because I'm almost getting a headache from you. um, and my turnover, so my revenue last year was roughly 35K. That's like, it's not bad as a freelancer.
Sure.
Like I looked at my bookkeeping software today and it's like, hey, the first year I made 7K, then I made 15, now I make 35, 30-ish. And so I double every year. I mean, that's good. But if I double this year again, that means I would make 60K.
Correct.
And then I'm in the danger zone.
Yes, you are.
So that's why I think it's specifically for me personally really interesting to have this podcast now. And when I took it, like, okay, I cut all the costs, and like I put my hotels and my Airbnb. It's all marketing costs because if I'm not there, like I'm just a non-profit media company, So like this is all we recorded in my apartment, so it's an Airbnb. Cool, I can officially take that off the company, and it's like all on paper.
Exactly.
It's still legal.
Yeah,
so
above board.
Yeah, like it's because I actually use it and I actually need it. It's also my office, so it's like it's legal. So my profit was like roughly 20K last year, so I'm still good. Even for Dutch, I think it's 23K that you need to pay like more taxes on it, like second box, like weird as shit. What would be the next step for me? So this year I would start to make, I have quite some projects going on. I have quite some new things that I'm working on, like the agency, the thing with my other business partner, you know him as well. When would it be interesting for me to say, okay, I need to get out? And then my first step, as we just discussed, is not because I love my citizenship. Dutch citizenship is a really good one to have. I don't want to lose that. What would be a first good step to get out?
Right.
And when?
Right on. So, like you said, now that you're making something like 32, 35?
35-ish.
Yeah. Like if you're in your 30s with revenue a year, that is the perfect time to be thinking about and strategizing about taxes. So the first step for you, and we'd already spoken about this somewhat, is breaking off your personal tax residency in the Netherlands. And just one thing to clear up, is this a limited company or is it a sole proprietorship in your own name?
It's sole proprietorship in my own name, so like freelancing.
So usually what happens with sole proprietorships is up to a certain amount. For example, in Serbia, it's 50,000 euros. I assume in the Netherlands, it's something similar, 50, 60, it's something like that.
20, 23, 25-ish.
Okay, so it's different. Any amount up to that, you literally just pay a monthly flat fee, and you're good. So like Slovenia has this, Serbia has this. In the Netherlands, it might be a percentage-based system up to a certain tranche.
It's like you invoice everything with 21% tax, and then every quarter you pay the 21% tax that you extra invoice.
Right on. Okay. So that's the system that's applied there. And the question becomes, what is the tax period for the Netherlands? Because for a lot of countries, the tax year is the exact same as the calendar year. So around December 30th, that's when filings happen, etc. For other countries, the US, for example, everybody knows tax season is in April. And for other countries, it varies based on when you incorporated your company, because they use automated systems. So, for example, in Singapore or Emirates, whenever you incorporated your company, that is the first day of the fiscal year for you. And when it comes to the next steps, obviously, thing one, separate your personal tax residency out of the Netherlands, the best way to do that is just notifying your government and especially your local tax office by saying that, hey, I departed the country at so and so date. I've not been back in the country. You can check with the police, and you can just get a confirmation from the police that you're not in the country, and you just ask them to disregard you for that tax period as a physical individual, as a person, as Job. Then the next thing is to figure out what you want to do with your sole proprietorship. Obviously, with getting paid, right? Your company, you need your company to get paid.
Yeah.
There, it's a completely different strategy than what we said with tax residency. With tax residency, it's like, oh, you want to break up with the first one before you do the second one. Well, with opening a company, it's different. You definitely want to open up the next one before you close your first one, because you do not want a period where you don't have a company and you can't collect revenue. Like, that is killer for business. Nothing to do with taxes. It's just a killer for business and for marketing. You don't want that, especially not having a bank account. So it would be opening up a company wherever you choose, and we can talk about that. But it's opening up a company somewhere, getting a bank account for it, seeing that everything works properly, like getting a payment into that bank account, and then and only then do you think about closing up your Dutch company. And 21% is relatively high. You can do better in different places where the upper limit is higher for taxation to begin, and there are places where your company would be completely disregarded. So one option to entertain would be, for example, going to the US and opening up a remote US LLC. Costs about $1,500 to do that with all the necessary paperwork and attestations, etc. And then it's like $900 a year to maintain, and all of your revenue on that is completely internationally disregarded, right? That's the company side of things, and personal residency. Well, that's a thing.
That's what we're gonna dive into now, because that's where I'm actually curious at. With all the choices that I laid out earlier in this podcast video, however you want to call it, you have Dubai, you have Paraguay, you have the E-residency of the Estonia. You have like all kinds of things there. How can you make a choice that's just the best for you? I mean, in the end, there are certain things people value. One is like paying as less as possible. Another thing people value is the stability of the country. That's something like, for example, if I would tell my parents I moved my residency to Paraguay, they would kill me because it's an unstable country and like all the EU news, the EU, European Union news that they get.
Yeah.
So based on different areas, and I think you hear them more often than me.
Yeah.
I just like drum up a couple. What are good countries to move your residency to based on different things that people value in it?
Makes sense. So I was going to do the fastest. It depends in the West, but
sorry, I tackled that up front for you.
Easy. So I'd say that for somebody who's just starting off and who's building their online business and does some type of consulting or web development, or has got an AI app or anything that's fully digital, and you just want to pay as little tax as possible, and you want to do this high-speed, cheap option, incorporating a company in the US is the thing, and getting a tax residency somewhere where you can just remotely do your work. And I'd say, as far as individual tax residencies, you've got, for example, Georgia as a very interesting option for digital nomads. Extremely low taxes. You get to stay in the country indefinitely as a digital nomad while getting taxed extremely low, like single digits. For some industries, it's as low as 1%. But the thing is, that's for people who want to sit in one place and just lock in, and that's how they want to live. So the thing to consider here is actually lifestyle. It's not really political stability. It's not these variables on a sheet. It's more to do with lifestyle. Some people really like the lifestyle that they can get in Dubai. I don't, but Dubai completely disregards individual tax. Dubai does not tax you on individual income, and in order to do that, you need to stay in Dubai for more than 6 months out of the year. So if you like hanging around those kinds of places, that's the way to do it. And then you've got remote residencies that you can set up. You've got things like Hong Kong or even Paraguay, which a lot of people are growing fond of, where you can just go there physically once, you get your individual tax residency set up, and then for a very long time you don't have to come back. You can just visit for one day, make sure that that it's checked off on your to-do list, and then you maintain your individual tax residency that way. And more recently, you've got the Honduran special economic zone called Prospera, and they're offering a worldwide residency, tax residency for individuals, where they just charge a flat fee per year. I think it's 5,000 US a year, and you get issued a tax certificate that you can show to any government and tell them this is the place where I'm a tax resident. So that part of the process is also quite interesting. Let's say that you officially divorce yourself from Dutch individual tax residency. You go to Paraguay, you open up your tax residency there, and you start receiving these monthly documents from the Paraguay tax authority saying that you are officially a tax resident of Paraguay, you Job. And what happens there is, let's say that the Dutch don't quite get the memo that you're not a tax resident anymore, and they send you some type of interrogation, like, "Oh, what's going on? We see that your company has been shut down. Like, are you're being investigated for money laundering or whatever?" And then what you do is you just issue them the paperwork saying, "I am not a tax resident in the Netherlands." You provide a different paper saying that I am a tax resident of Paraguay and I have a company set up somewhere that isn't the Netherlands. So you can just go pound sand. Like, you do not have jurisdiction over me. People get confused in these tax authority offices all the time. They do not understand how international tax works. Like, this is the purview of very few experts who go to the same conferences every year, and I've met a lot of them. And it's not, you can't expect, whoever works in the local, in The Hague, right, in the local tax office, to understand what the tax policy of the Emirates is or something like that. What they're specialized in is their own unique school of bureaucracy and the types of forms that they file. They don't really understand these four categories that we spoke about. So using the lack of knowledge that your country's tax authority has is an important step in increasing your own freedom, because a lot of the time they don't know what they're doing, and we do. So
then it's also interesting. Okay, so you have like residency where you need to stay in a place for a certain amount
correct.
of time. For example, in Georgia, that could be quite interesting, or Dubai, if that lifestyle is interesting to you. And you have a remote residency,
Correct.
where you just go to the country for X amount of period of time. So Paraguay one day, you have Hong Kong.
You got Estonian E-residency, forgot to mention.
Yeah, Estonian E-residency. What else do you have? Like Hong Kong, Paraguay, Estonian E-residency.
There's a couple more I can think of. You could do Panama's one you could do.
I heard about that one, yeah.
They only require a few days a year, and you can get it different ways. You can get it from the so-called friendly nations. So that would be your Canada, your pretty much any NATO country is like a friendly nation of Panama. You could get it as a retiree. So a lot of countries have special retiree programs, especially if they're like tropical countries where a lot of people retire because of the weather. There's a lot of that. But yeah, Panama's a good
Interesting.
option as
And
well.
then like out of those, you can categorize it in what's important to you. If you have like a remote, like for me personally, a remote residency is the most interesting, because I like to travel. I like to be in Bali. I like to go to Thailand, like we're now. I really want to go to next year, like South America is on the calendar for me. I really want to explore that. So then for me right now in the life phase that I'm in, a remote residency, if I grow if and when the company grows a bit more, is more interesting.
Oh, absolutely.
So, and then you say like Panama, Estonia, Hong Kong, and Paraguay. what are the things that you need to take into consideration when picking one of those? Is there like a good or bad? And now you can do your fucking pistol thing, but like,
So as far as Estonia goes, I'd say that's the one that accepts the least error. So the Estonians are very smart about how they detect movement, and they exchange information very rapidly with other EU countries. Like that is something that Estonia does pretty well. If you've got your tax residency in something like Estonia and you live inside of the EU, just be aware that the Estonians will send your information to your government, and then you might have more situations where the Dutch authorities send you paperwork asking, "Oh, what's going on? Where are you?" etc. So
yeah,
there's a lot
fair.
of that. So you've got places like Panama and the UAE, which are significantly less likely to send that information to the relevant authorities. So it's really a business culture of the tax authorities of those countries where you get your individual tax residency, and how regular they are in terms of sending information to those other jurisdictions. Often you'll see that the OECD or CRS, so these tax exchange agreements, you'll see the ratings that different countries have, and you'll just see them saying something like Panama, not timely in responses. And literally you could just imagine some guy whose job it is to answer these emails and do his job, but he's just too busy having caipirinhas on the beach, right? So
I mean, it's called priorities. Well, what can
exactly.
you say?
Yeah, you just got to prioritize. And the great thing is, any country in the world is exactly as valid as any other country in the world. So just because
There's so basically, if we simplify it, there's no good or bad. It's just like preferences and what fits the best for you. If you say, hey,
exactly.
Paraguay, I don't really like the things that are going on there with the
Mhm.
government. Fuck that. I go like F that. I go to Panama. Or you say, hey, I like the fact that I stay a bit in EU
Mhm.
because I want to be weird. I personally am not a big believer.
Nothing beats a European summer, though.
Yes, but I'm not a big believer on where the European
Oh,
economy and
absolutely.
like
That's
how
the
where that all of that is going. But I think let's not dive into that
no,
rabbit hole, and specifically not while we're on record. So then you can say Estonia, for example. I think my parents would love Estonia the most, but
Mhm.
like no. Okay, so cool. So then we'll have the remote residency, for example, in Panama, and then it's time for the next step.
Mhm.
And then the next step is company.
Yes.
And then the easiest from what you've mentioned so far is just an LLC, I guess.
Yeah, US LLC is great. Funnily enough, when you mentioned Panama, you can also open up a Panamanian company, relatively cheap, like $3,000 a year, establishment plus maintenance every year. After that, and I want to give these numbers out not because I'm advertising the service, but just because I want everybody to understand what sort of the order of magnitude is for paying for this type of thing. An Emirates company will be a bit more; it'll be like 9,000 US. It's quite up there, depending on the free zone, of course. Then what other places would be good to open up a company? Like I mentioned, Dubai free zones. If you're trying to do something with crypto, if you're like issuing a token, there are jurisdictions where you can get licensed to issue a token relatively easily. You've got places like Anguilla in the Caribbean. You've got Singapore with its blockchain sandbox where you're allowed to issue it as a security with a lot of legal
Am I
security.
allowed to think it's very funny that they call it sandbox in Singapore?
Anything but in Singapore, I'd say.
Just, I think it's very funny. But
Licensing is a thing to consider as well. So if you're doing something like an online casino, for example, the Dutch territory of Curacao is super popular for that. And just as a Dutchman, Curacao is something to look at because you can open up a Curacao company there. It's called a Curacao Investment Company, CIC, and that gets completely disregarded for international investment. So if you use that for crypto trading or owning real estate overseas or owning equities and securities, none of that gets taxed in Curacao. And if you have your own physical residency in Curacao, that's not as good. But having a Curacao investment company managing these investments is great. And then a lot of these Caribbean countries, they have agreements between each other that if you've got a trust company in something like Saint Kitts and Nevis, one of the island countries, other jurisdictions inside of the Caribbean will recognize that company structure. Sometimes you will have it happen that one country just simply does not recognize a different country's structure. So in the UK, you can open up a discretionary mutual fund, which is a type of insurance/financial fund. If you try to get that banked in the US, you're going to run into problems because they just don't understand the regulatory setup. Similarly, in Germany, they don't recognize it. You need specifically like Canada or Australia or New Zealand or one of the smaller islands or territories of Britain in order to get something like that banked.
So if we take it out in steps, and then now again I take myself as an example. Step one for me, since my company is in the Netherlands, would be setting up. In this case, depending on, I'm thinking about my next step, so it's either going to be Paraguay or Panama. In my case, right now, or Hong Kong, maybe we should talk about that.
Your individual tax residency.
Yeah.
Yes.
So then, but before that, because my income comes from my Dutch company, the LLC would be a good choice.
Yes.
So step one for me personally, or as a remote entrepreneur, before moving your residency is moving your income out of the country.
Yes.
Else you're gonna like F yourself there.
Absolutely.
So, and then you can still like invoice it to your Dutch company or like your German company or whatever.
Yes.
How you want to do it. And you still pay taxes on it, but you can also keep money in the LLC of America.
Correct.
And in that way, you don't pay tax on the money.
The U.S. absolutely does not send tax information to everybody. They don't care. They are the empire. They do what they want.
And we've seen that in recent political events that are happening from.
And it might be that within 2 months, everything that I say is completely irrelevant, and the U.S. has just taken over the world, and now everybody reports to the IRS. Just saying.
Just saying. Just like to spit it out. Okay, cool. And cool, nice. Let's do that. So then, step one would be like an LLC, and that would be the best option, so you secure your income there. Then step two would be
banking for that
and banking for the LLC, and that goes through a US bank,
yes.
I think. Yeah. And then it's residency, and then residency, in my case, a remote residency instead of like a physical residency somewhere. So Georgia, Dubai, off the table for me. Remote residency, Paraguay, Panama, Hong Kong. One of those options, because I want to get out of the EU.
Emirates is sort of in between, like there is some presence, but not too much.
Yeah. And then step two. So then you have your physical residency, then you have your tax residency. I think depending on where you do your physical residency, it's good to say I'm going to do my tax residency there as well. So for example, physical residency in Paraguay, tax residency in Paraguay would be still a good choice.
Yeah.
Physical residency in Panama, I know the taxes there are quite low. Still a good choice.
Yeah.
Estonia, 30%. Get the fuck out.
Yeah.
So
not doing it.
So that's not a good choice. So that's also something that you can take into consideration depending on your next step. And then your fourth step, that's like take a bank.
Yeah.
Because you already set up the company if you're a freelancer or like work remote. You fix that, you have a company bank account, it's all good. Fiscal residency, you fix that, all good. Then tax residency, you fix that, all good. What impact if you fixed all of this, what impact does this have on your citizenship?
So your citizenship, if you're born as a Dutch citizen, they can't take away your citizenship pretty much no matter what happens. Like even if you perform some type of terrible crime, taking away one's citizenship is practically impossible. One thing to be aware of is that if you're a dual citizen, so let's say that I'm a Dutch citizen and through marriage or naturalization or something like that, I became half Italian, and I also have Italian citizenship. And let's say that I lived in Italy for a while and became a massive tax liability for Italy. Like I became a tax resident there, but I didn't pay my taxes, and I racked up a massive debt, like 500,000 euros or something. If you got your citizenship sometime after your birth, like if you weren't born with it, like you got it when you were 8 or something, your parents didn't get around to doing it fast enough. You're treated as, well, hold on, what's this guy doing here? And they might, in extreme circumstances, through like acts of ministries, they can actually rescind your citizenship if
But
you're big enough trouble for them.
but only if you effed it up in the country
Correct,
itself,
correct. Like you
and
can't
else they don't have any
grounds for that.
ground. Cool. So then citizenship, you're good.
Yeah.
Because once you have it, you have it.
Correct.
Even if you, because I know in the Netherlands that's quite a thing. If you come as an immigrant, you stay long enough, you go through the processes and everything, and you got your citizenship, you got your Dutch passport as an immigrant. So then you're officially a Dutch citizen.
Mm-hmm.
Then they cannot take that away anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Okay.
Other countries where you got that through there's a lot of citizenship by investment programs. There's citizenship by merit or by exception, so for like athletes and scientists and that type of thing.
Yeah, for example, in Brazil, if you have a child in Brazil, it's a Brazilian citizen, and then if you stay in Brazil for like 2 to 3 years, you are able to have a fast-forward Brazilian passport.
You get naturalized faster. And many countries, and especially in Latin America, many of them reserve the right to take away your citizenship if you misbehave a lot, if you got naturalized. So Mexico, for example, is a big one for that.
Yeah, then again, you need to misbehave, and else
Correct.
it's like you're saying, like,
And
let's go out of the fact that we're normal people and no misbehavior.
Yeah.
You have multiple citizenships, or can create multiple citizenships, or just like have your own citizenship, and you're good. Then, okay, next step, we have that. Has no effect on citizenship, LLC, bank account. That's where we are now.
So bank account is probably the trickiest one, because anybody who manages a bank doesn't do it because they want to, help you hide your transactions, etc. They do it because they want to make money. And the thing about banks is they are in many jurisdictions required to take out corporate indemnity insurance, meaning that they, if they misbehave, if they don't respect fiduciary responsibility, if they don't act in a fully professional way, they incur cost on that. And what professional indemnity insurance requires is that you remain fully compliant with international regulations. So all of that to say, banks are very afraid, like they're very low risk. They don't want to err with regard to regulations or anything like that. So the banks are the people who are likeliest to screw something up for you, and that's why you need to be very very choosy with your banks. You want somebody who's aware of the regulations, who knows exactly how far they can take it, and.
And if we list a couple, so for example, with my setup right now, I'm a resident of either Paraguay or Panama. I think I leave Hong Kong out of the picture. Like it never attracted me that much. It's like I'm a bigger fan of like Paraguay, maybe good meat, stuff like that. So I'm a resident there. I have an LLC in America, tax residency of Paraguay as well, and what are lists of banks that are good in certain structures here. So for remote, because I think if you are on a, and this is me just like guessing, if you are on a physical residency, for example, in the UAE, so Emirates or whatever, or Georgia or anything like that, it's the most convenient to have like a Georgian bank or like a UAE. But I think that's a simple step.
Yes.
Yeah. But for a remote residency, it becomes a bit more difficult, as you just said. So what are the good... I'm a big fan of Revolut right now, for example. I hear a lot of people say a lot of things about Wise as well. Funny enough, both Estonian.
Yeah.
But then the Estonian taxes are... So, just a fun fact. What are some good banks?
So what you're naming, like N26 and Revolut and Wise, those are e-banks. They're fintechs essentially, and they don't necessarily work in the same way that a traditional bank like Chase or Bank of America or something like that works. My preference is to carry on using the legacy bank system as opposed to these new fintechs, because the fintechs essentially exist on the with the permission of the establishment legacy banks. And I fear that the desire that these institutions have for scale will implement certain regulatory and reporting processes that none of us want. So if you're wise as a business, right, and you're scaling extremely quickly, you've got meetings with investors, you've got meetings with your corporate indemnity insurance people, and everybody's telling you like, hey, it's great that you're doing this rapid growth thing, etc. But eventually, tax authorities are going to want to have all of that tasty, beautiful data that you have, and that is the part that frightens me. Banks, for all their legacy and glacier-like movement, they're pretty bad at recording their data, and especially using the
It's like quite a Chesterfield sofa,
Mm.
oak wood desk industry with
Exactly.
lots of regulations. While
Mhm.
like I advise some company on their marketing and visiting their target audience, and people are like, "Yeah, banks because they have money." I'm like, "Yeah, they do have money." But the fact when you get your money, if you get a bank as a client, you need to go through all the diligence, all the compliance, all of that. You're like half a year later on before you even sign your first
Yes,
client when you're in the banking industry. So like,
100%.
but that's also your benefit when it comes to cases like this.
Yes, because that extreme slow movement runs both ways. Like by the time they figure out what's going on with all of the people who have moved their business offshore, etc. By the time they figure that out, you've already moved to the next jurisdiction. Like, and this is, I'm talking like years, like 3 or 4 years per jurisdiction that you'd maybe want to move, though I've not yet had situations where that became necessary. Um,
So then for banks, what are the good banks that we can take into consideration if you have the entire setup all done?
okay, so internationally, if you want an individual tax account, you can use something like Bank of Georgia and their Solo program, which is great for individual. That's why they call it Solo, right? For individuals internationally, and you can put your money to receive interest on those funds. And Georgia's interest rate is still pretty high. I think like 8% or something per
Oh,
year.
it's
Um, so that's on the individual side. And then on the business side, again, depends where you're incorporated. If you're in the US, you want to be using US bank accounts simply because you can move Fed wire payments relatively easily inside of the country. It happens within an hour. You can do automated clearinghouse payments to places like Canada or the UK where they have clearinghouse roadways for that. Um, and the funny thing is, all of these different ways of paying. So you've got your wire payments. You've got
this is like a whole podcast in
oh,
itself.
absolutely,
Like,
absolutely. You've got these different ways of sending money. Like, yeah, the money arrives in your account, but there's different ways of doing it.
yeah, like
And
Swift payments, you name it.
exactly,
Yeah,
and they run different programming languages, and they
yeah.
get collected into different databases. So there's so much discrepancy in how fast money can be detected, even in the legacy banking system, that it gives you way more flexibility than like I can't advise using something like Wise or Revolut, etc. Simply because, like I mentioned,
It's a scale
there's
up. It's a
it's a
fintech.
scale up, it's a fintech, and they have a lot. They have all of the data down pat. And if they choose ever to cooperate with some type of OECD like international tax organization, because that's the thing we need to unlock the next tranche of investment from BlackRock or whatever, your data's out there, and every government will have full transparency into it, and then it's up to the government what they choose to do with that. You might want to
Even though your like your remote residency, your tax residency, and your company setup is completely legal,
yep,
you still can get screwed over if you want to
they can
be
lock up
a
your account.
yeah.
Like this happened to a client. They had everything properly set up, but their government thought that there was a problem because they saw this person's fintech account movements. And what they did was they sent a document to the fintech saying so and so client number so and so with that bank account, we suspect them of using Revolut to avoid taxes. So what happens? Revolut immediately locks up your account and makes a massive headache for you until you solve it. Whereas,
so when it comes to like concrete banks, so I have my residency in like Paraguay, Panama. Now I still use Revolut. You say, okay, that's a tricky one. Well, for now it's good because I'm still a resident of the Netherlands, my company.
Sure.
So like, for now I'm good for that.
Yeah.
With that. What are, so you say Bank of Georgia with their solo program. What else?
Also, there's several privacy-based banks that I don't want to name necessarily on this program. I usually recommend them in person only. And they're these, they've got a total of 3 blocks of text on their website, and you have to call them by phone to register things, and then they send you the email where you send your documentation. Like, I like those privacy-centered banks in Southeast Asia, in the Caribbean.
That's basically network.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, and then I mean, I get that, and then it's still like completely legal.
Yes.
Like everything is completely legal. You do have a bank account.
Yes.
You do have a credit card, probably through Visa, MasterCard, or
exactly.
Yeah. That's. I learned so much in this podcast. I'm like,
it's this insane thing because if you've ever spoken to, let me make a parallel here. If you've ever spoken to somebody who's in medical stuff and they start talking about hormones, oh yeah, everybody thinks like, oh yeah, I'm just going to increase my testosterone, right? Well, hold on, like that has so many follow-on effects, and everything affects everything else.
It's like the butterfly effect.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
So it's really difficult to. Somebody asked me like, oh, is it good to, as a US LLC, is it good to open up a bank account in the Virgin Islands? I need to understand so much more than that to make a judgment.
I think from now on, if people ask you that question, you can literally just send them this podcast.
So I will.
And that's not to promote my own thing, but I think we covered everything that you need to know. We basically covered almost everything, right?
Yeah.
That you need to know to do it in a legal way, to like avoid or dodge governments and taxes in a legal way. We covered everything step by step in, I think, clear to understand language.
Absolutely, and
so
this is an important thing to say, like the legal aspect. You watch these Jason Bourne movies, whatever, and sometimes there'll be a scene where it's like, they just moved $75 million out of a Cayman Islands bank account, and then it's in this trust in Liechtenstein, and then there's this Hollywoodization of this thing, and the implication is that it's done by bad guys, and that it's not acceptable, and that it's evil, and that type of thing. And the thing is, I just want to reiterate this. Everything that we're talking about is strictly above board. It is strictly legal. And the only difficult part of all of this is sometimes governments are extremely slow on the uptake, or banks or whatever other legacy institutions. They're just slow on the uptake, and then you need to like tap them on the head and be like, yeah, I know.
I have one question when it comes to this, to finish it all up. And then I'm thinking we can either go a little bit into flag theory, but I think we already talked for strictly an hour. And if we talk about flag theory, we will sit here for at least another hour. So I think I will leave flag theory and citizenship and moving citizenship and getting multiple passports up to the next episode that we're either going to do somewhere else in the world when we meet again, because I mean,
so we will.
Besides this, like, cowboys don't say goodbye; they say see you later. Bookkeeping. When you have all of this set up, you say governments are extremely slow. You also need to find a bookkeeper or someone who will manages all of this and like your invoices and the whole shebang. Where the F do you find a good bookkeeper that understands? Because I love my bookkeeper now, but he's good for Netherlands jurisdictions and the things I'm doing now. But when I go bigger or when I like move out, I know I need to move bookkeepers but I think the bookkeeper that understands this type of stuff becomes rare.
Yeah, certainly does. There's a metaphor that I like to use for accountancy and bookkeeping. Let's say that you're a big hotshot executive, and you have a private driver, and you go around town getting driven, right? Well, the driver is your bookkeeper, is your accountancy guy, and the car that you drive around in, that is the international structure that you've made with your tax residency and with your corporation, etc. So the experience, the ride that you get, to a large extent depends on what you've structured. Because I don't care how good the driver is. If you're like we're here in Thailand, right? If you're on the back of a moped, it's not going to be very comfortable. Like it doesn't matter how good the guy is. And then if it's something extremely comfortable, like Rolls-Royce limousine, whatever, the driver can even be not very good, and it's still pretty comfortable for you, because there's a lot of leeway in there. Ultimately, you want both to be well optimized. So
Now we optimize the car. I think right now with what we've talked about, we are certainly driving like at least a Bentley or a Rolls Royce.
100%. And as far as getting a good accountant goes, my company that helps people open all of these local setups, residencies, etc. We've got a network of accountants that do this type of thing. Thankfully, accountants stick together like well, think of something that sticks together, but they have
Glue.
yes, they've got loads of standardization programs and licensing, and there's a reason why they do that, because anybody can say they keep the numbers straight, but you need not only do you need somebody whose social proof comes from these types of outside forms of validation, but also you want somebody that you can hold accountable. You've got their registration number. You've got who to call, and somebody's life is getting ruined if your numbers aren't kept properly. So you have to do your own research. Like if you're finding your own person, do your own research by finding their licensing authority, find their identification number. If they have testimonials, that's good, but nothing comes quite as close as having them by the licensing number. That's the thing they fear the most. Um, when it comes to what makes a good accountant, like a good accountant keeps the numbers straight. A great accountant understands exactly how far he can go in things like waiting before a response is made, or making up for certain numbers somewhere else, that type of thing. Um, depends on what the tax filings
I
look
wanna
like.
I wanna add one thing
Hmm.
there. And an amazing accountant sends you messages and says, "Hey, you need to fix this part. Hey, I saw this loophole here."
Mm,
So an amazing accountant also communicates and keeps you up to date,
yes,
so you know what numbers are coming when and where.
exactly. Because looking at numbers is so difficult. Like somebody who does proactive and client-friendly communication about it, that's fantastic. Sometimes they'll just take you on as a trial for like a week and a half, just to give you a taste of what it's like when they do your accounting, and some of them really show themselves well.
Yeah, and I think if you do it, if you are an accountant and watch this, if you communicate well and like tell me upfront, like if I need to ask you for something, you're too late.
Exactly.
That's because, for example, I'm still waiting on my bookkeeping numbers for 2025
Mm,
to say, hey, what is the amount of taxes that I need to pay over 2025? Because I know I need to pay it eventually. Like, I think I still have like 4 or 5 months. So, like, I'm not in a hurry,
hmm
but I want to know those numbers
hmm
so I can keep a certain amount of money apart.
Right.
And then he told me, for example, hey, then you need to do this, 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 and this. Then I did this, this, and this, and now I'm still waiting for the number. So like
Yeah.
the proactiveness and the communication from an accountant is amazing.
100%.
If an accountant has that,
Mm.
that to me is like But
So good, great, amazing.
yeah, good, great, amazing, through the distinctions that we made here, then I think it's only fair to say if people want to find you, I mean, you're quite hard to find when it comes to location wise and for governments. But if people want to find you to work with you, what are all the things that I need to put below in the description so they can find you, and what are the price points? Because we already said it's like from 60K and above. It makes sense to do something like this. And what are the
60K earnings and above?
yeah, and what are the price points that they can take into consideration for this, for an investment like this, because it will bring you the investment back.
This is what I want to make very clear. I just sent out a proposal to a client 2 days ago, and they make 165K before taxes per year in Canada by doing trading. And then because of capital gains tax in Canada, their take home every year is 95K. And that's not necessarily the best result. So we calculate exactly how much we can save every year for them. So we take a look at percentages. We take a look at how much the various fees cost, how much it costs to open up a physical office somewhere and have an accountant sit there, because you need that in order to, like in that particular jurisdiction that we're doing for them. We calculate all of that stuff, and then we put it down into a single page, and we say, look, previous case, you're making 165, you're taking back 95, right? And then the new case is you're making 165, you're taking back 138. And we just made you, what's that, 5 and 38, that's like over $40,000. And that is the type of thing that that we specialize in. Like, if I don't care how much trickery and cool stuff we can do with taxes and banking and residencies, etc. If we're not saving you money, what's the point? I had this client come in. It was the funniest thing. Rather, not a client. I tried to make him one, and he was a Swiss gentleman, and he's speaking to me about this stuff, and he makes pretty good money. And I'm trying to convince him about a certain package, and he says like, but like I'm tax resident where? At 0%. He's like, and he's writing this stuff down, and he's like, okay, so I save 25,000 euros per year on this, and I save 70,000 euros per year on this. And he says, okay, but what do I get from those governments in return? And I'm like, it's just a place where you can be completely tax-free. You get your liberty to go around the world, etc. He's like, yes, but I was once in Spain skiing and I broke my leg, and the Swiss government sent a helicopter for me and picked me up in Spain and took me back to a medical center in Switzerland. And that was completely free and included in my 10% tax that I pay in Switzerland. And I looked at that, and I went to Europe Assist, which is the insurance people who transport you, etc. Europe Assist would have charged him 95,000. Sorry, not 95. 90,000. I was thinking that number. 90,000 euros for that same amount. And I just compare that to the amount that he would have been saving with my thing, which is something like, it's less than that. And I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe you're better with your old tax residency. So that's the thing. We gotta put these numbers down on paper and figure out exactly if this makes sense for you. But where can people find me? I'm on Instagram. I'll speak to anybody on LinkedIn as well. That's Aleksa Bormazovic. We'll put those down, and I use Telegram as well if people have some more sensitive stuff that they want to talk about, like cryptocurrency and banking and that type of thing. So I'm on Instagram. I'm on LinkedIn, and
let's say let's do it like this. We leave your Instagram, we leave your LinkedIn, and they can send you a message there, and then through that
they can get to my Telegram.
Yeah, they can get to your Telegram. Do you also have a company website that I should link down below?
It is Sud America Hub, SUD America Hub, and it's SETI. That's SETTEE.io.
I will leave it down below.
Sounds good. Thank you, man.
All right, thank you very much. I learned a lot. That was a really awkward handshake. Thank you for that as well.
No, let's reshoot that.
Okay. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot at this video. I have actually no clue how long we took for it, but I know I will go to you when the time is right. At
I'll
least.
be glad to have you. And whoever's listening to this in the gym, you've just spent a very good hour doing this.
I always listen to podcasts in the gym though.
Oh man,
I love that.
I'll literally listen to these panels at the tax technology conferences, and they're talking about like, oh yes, at which stage of a bank transfer do we flag it for money laundering? And it's like, it's great stuff.
You're such a nerd. All right, like, subscribe to the Little Rain Dance, touch your nose, and stay out of authorities. Ciao.